Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with Us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty. I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, it is a few days from Halloween when this is going to be coming out, and of course, we've got to get into that spooky season with a little bit of world-building jam. Delicious jam. So on today's episode, you've heard us do this before. We're going to roll some dice on a custom built world building jam session, and we're going to create some little horror movies for you guys based on some random dice rolls. I love the spooky season. I love horror movies, and I am very excited to get into this.
Halloween is my favorite holiday, but this year I have no decorations up, and I don't even care because this disease has ruined the world, so it doesn't matter anymore.
Daniel is actually in costume right now as a doomer. You can't see it, but yeah, he's going as a doomer this year. So
the only good thing coming out of this month, besides our Halloween episode, obviously, is Dune. Honestly, like I'm not even looking forward to Halloween.
Yeah. Speaking of Halloween specials are the best part of almost anything, but I do want to give a special shout out to the Muppets Haunted Mansion little Halloween special that came out fairly recently. If you are like me and you cry every time you hear Rainbow Connection, this little special is like so cute and so nice. It's not even that good, frankly, but it's Muppets and it's Halloween themed. So, like, of course, I'm going to recommend it.
It sounds pretty adorable, even if it's not good.
It is very adorable. And yeah, it's not that great, but there's great lines in it, and that's what matters. So without further ado, we're going to roll some dice. And the first thing that we're going to be rolling off is the subgenre. We've got a bunch of different subgenres of of spooky variety. So we're going to roll the die and see what we get. First things first, we got a werewolf movie. All right. Or setting/scenario. And the thing that we're going to be focusing on in this werewolf scenario is a family. Oh, so fun. The theme that we're going to be rolling on is curses. Boy, this is stock standard werewolf stuff. So let's make it more interesting. Who wants to start us off? We're focusing on a family. Are they a family of werewolves? Are they not? Where are we going with this? Let's start off.
I would just like to avoid them being traditional werewolves in the traditional sense in any way, because that's so boring and overplayed. I'm hoping we can do something with werewolves that's a transformation, but not necessarily what we would normally think of as being werewolves.
Now, what do you mean by that, Daniel? You're saying that you don't want them to turn into anthropomorphic wolves, or is it something else?
Yes, that. And I would be nice if someone were to look at this and not realize it's werewolves until they analyze it more. Because I feel like we've actually done a few episodes of werewolves. That's one reason. But two, like the world building on werewolves, it can get tired unless we do something really interesting.
So, I mean, I think that's why we're here, is to do something that's not tired. So what can we do to take the traditional werewolf and make it interesting again?
I mean, thinking about ways to make it like not obvious that it's a werewolf movie right away. What if we kind of flip it around and the main family characters aren't werewolves? Maybe they're like defending their property from these bizarre like wolf attacks that keep happening, and they're trying to figure out what's going on there.
Okay,
I like that. Yeah,
I can definitely support that first. My initial thought is this is a family that's new to town. And maybe they're a bunch, because I'm thinking of like Arachnophobia for some reason, where it's like a bunch of city folk who've all moved out to the countryside, right?
I was thinking of a ranch too, or like a countryside spot.
Yeah. Well, of course, you got to isolate people. It's hard to do like urban spooky movies when you're doing werewolves, because that's just a thing. But we can kind of start there, and we can either make it so, or the kind of direction that I'm looking at is, this town is full of werewolves, or this
Mhm.
town knows that werewolves exist but don't tell the family for whatever reason.
I like the latter, because then it makes them more dangerous. I mean, not more dangerous, but more ominous.
Sure. I mean, we can, if we're evoking, like an American Werewolf in London, maybe this family goes into town and everyone's really unfriendly for whatever reason. Maybe, hold on, I think I might have an idea. Maybe all of these townsfolk are basically there, and they're feeding this family to the werewolves, or trying to, because they have a curse that requires some kind of bloodletting or some kind of sacrifice that happens. So I think what might be fun is that you hint that it's, the townsfolk this entire time, but then at the end it's like, oh, we're not werewolves, we just kind of serve one in kind of a certain way,
Yeah, I like that.
Could we incorporate some kind of modern religious cult? The reason why is I've been watching a lot of cult documentaries, and this suits this environment we're creating. Like, I'm thinking in terms of modern religious cult, like, there's new religious kind of organizations that spring up around a motivational speaker, and then they end up having their own little compound or their own little town.
Oh, I
think that would be great for this. So like, if the people are kind of like not 50s-esque, but like, more prudish and conservative in their views.
Can we have the family just be a cult? So it's like, the father, so to speak, is actually just a hypothetical father, and it's the cult leader. And maybe they're like, so actually that's kind of where you can see the twist settle in, is that you think that it's going to be a movie about this cult who's like slowly tries to transform a town into, to like bring them under their fold, only to find out that like this werewolf exists, and like there's already a pre-existing cult that is far more ancient and less modern to the one that we have going on there.
Could we also modernize it? So like, I just watched this episode of What We Do in the Shadows that had a jazzercise cult involved.
I just watched
Can
that
we
too.
bring in like an MLM, or like some kind of modern scheme that would not anticipate werewolves being involved?
Oh my God.
Or like
essential oils.
Yeah, essential oils.
Oh, I actually can kind of dig essential oils. I can get behind that. So it's like, and then maybe there's like a little bit of like a kind of a dueling cult at the very beginning, where it's like, hey, we got MLMs, and then they're more of a traditional cult. And then there's like this moment of somewhat comedy where you find that they're both trying to convert one another, and they're not really, neither one of them are noticing it,
And it would also like subvert the typical cult is conservative religious background. Instead, it could be like one of those fringe lefty hippie kind of attitudes that the cult has, like like Lulu, what's it called, LuLaRoe kind of deal.
Oh yeah,
or anything involving crystals, like that's never a good sign.
Never good.
So I love where we're going with this. The concept that I have in my head is that maybe the lycanthropy is like the final stage of this cult's like kind of evolution, right? Where it's like, it's like you're trying to return to primitive man, because that's ultimately what werewolfism and lycanthropy comes down to, is like the savage nature of humanity, and trying to avoid that. And maybe we can kind of take that modern cult and turn that and flip it into a good thing, where it's like, like, oh, we're trying to return to nature, like, and that's where like that kind of like hippie leftist movement kind of comes in,
Yeah, it fits really well with that.
Yeah, could we say that then the werewolf or whatever it is at the top of their MLM? And are we saying the family that's coming into this is introducing its own little scheme too?
Well,
that's competing with it.
I'm thinking that the family, quote unquote, that's coming in is more like a Nexium style cult, where they're trying to escape from modernity, escape from, maybe they had a scandal recently, and so now it's just like the cult leader and his core members that are left. It's the family. And so they've escaped the city to try and come and hide out while everything blows over, it hopes to blow over, like that's kind of the framework that I'm thinking in. And then there's this fun little duel that happens between them. That's kind of what I'm thinking anyway. I'm open to suggestions, obviously.
could we parallel the leader of that cult to the werewolf leader as like a vampire versus a werewolf? But we haven't defined what they really are yet, but maybe that's the types of things they are.
I mean, we don't even need to make the family supernatural necessarily. You know, like I think just the twist that there's a cult trying to come into like a small family or a small town is like kind of fun enough. You know,
like that's so like the town's cult is his secret.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the ulterior motives are secret anyway. The town's cult is an MLM, so it's like overt. You know, like that's the part that's overt. But then when you dig down, like when you investigate, then you see that there's a more sinister motive for the werewolf cult that's in town, but it's hidden by essential oils and new age bullshit, you know? And then maybe actually, hold on. This might be kind of fun to deal with. Maybe the cultists are actually selling werewolf repellent items. And so it's like, you have to buy into this MLM or you will be hunted and murdered by a werewolf. You know, it's like, oh, I'm buying all these essential oils and they're like wolf's bane or something like that. Or it's like, instead of like crystals, it's like, oh, I buy a bunch of silver, you know, like accessories or something like that. And so on the outside, if you can, you know, like genre savvy people are going to look at that and be like, oh, werewolves, got it. But then like it's at the head of it is an actual werewolf who's like, look, I'm selling you your survival. You're going to get it or you're not, you know?
I do really love the idea of the werewolf, like literally being at the top of the pyramid scheme. It's just like a really funny image.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're saying wolf right now, but can we make it not a wolf? Like, can it be some other transformation? Because I'm really opposed to it actually being a werewolf, like a literal werewolf.
Okay, what's your persona, Daniel? What animal do you want it to transform into?
Or even an animal. I don't know. Like, I think we should take some aspect of what werewolves mean and turn that into a thing.
Well, we've already done that. Like I said, like the kind of thematic edge of the werewolf is these are people who have rejected the civilized aspect of humanity and they have returned to a savage, brutal, violent aspect, which is the wolf. You know, like way back in our, we actually did a monster makeover episode on werewolves, and we talked about kind of their origin. And I think that, you know, like rejecting modernity and return to monkey, but in this case, it's actually a wolf, is kind of what we're looking at. And I think we can explore that through the MLM selling this as a return to nature. You know, like it's a nature retreat type thing.
I guess what I don't find congruent with it is that at the top of this, you've got all these modern trappings, and at the top of this is a literal werewolf. So I'm hoping we can create some other kind of monstrosity that comes out of it that on second glance, you're like, oh, these are all the elements of a werewolf story. There's a transformation now that makes sense, rather than like you uncover the scheme, you find the top of the pyramid, and there's an actual literal werewolf there. So, which I just find kind of, it could be funny. I mean, it could work, but I find it kind of boring because it's expected.
Well, see, that I think that you know what, Daniel, I think what we should do is roll a spooky twist and see what we can do with what we got. Yeah. So we've got a specialized spooky twist list, and hopefully this will help. This will hopefully kind of elucidate what we're trying to go for with this whole situation. So let's roll the twist and see what happens. Okay, so it says here that one of the victims is actually the killer, which classic trope. So let's go ahead and what can we run with this situation that we've created so far?
Our victims of the family, right? At least
Presumably. And I think this is kind of maybe we add in the twist that, oh, this is a very murderous cult. And that's, you know, like maybe that's the aspect that gets hinted at, you know, throughout the entire scenario that we're kind of coming up with here, or not. I'm open to ideas. I mean, what are we thinking?
You're talking about the new family being the murderous ones, Rob?
I mean, I'm open to, I like to think of this as maybe both sides are murderous and maybe there's like a little bit of Freddy versus Jason, or like, Abbott and Costello meet the Wolfman type situation going on. But again, I'd like to hear what everyone else has to say.
Interesting. I mean, that could even be their reasoning for moving out to this area if they like bought a ranch and it's a perfect spot to bury a whole lot of dead bodies if they need to do that for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Are they also being pursued by the feds? Because this family's in their own kind of financial scheme, right? That they're escaping from into this other one.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so you could introduce another faction.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Daniel, for sure. Now I'm kind of approaching this story as your camera is so tightly focused on this cult family that, like you're bringing in these other characters who are like maybe an investigative journalist or maybe
a detective.
Yeah, maybe there's like police who are trying to get involved, and maybe that's the camera that you follow. And then, that these investigators know that the family's a cult. And then, like you throw in the other stuff. I don't know. I love the kind of like twist that we're going for here. It's fun.
Questions I'd have for you guys is like, what's the essence of an MLM or a pyramid scheme? Like, what is the emotional core of it that really inspires people? Greed. Okay. And what else?
Well, it's greed, but it's also a sense of you're breaking free from traditional structures in hopes to claim your own power.
And belonging too, right?
Yeah, like a purpose for yourself. And
yeah.
So I feel like the monster should express that in some way.
Again, I can't help but think of werewolf. Like this to me, like what else represents something like that? Like a rejection of all of that to truly embrace something that is powerful. Like this is the only way that I can achieve powers through this metamorphosis. And mind you, we can lean a little bit more into the curses as well. Like we haven't really touched on that theme as much. So if we want to maybe circle back on that might help as well.
And there's a two-facedness to the werewolf too, and I see that expressed in the leader of an MLM. Like they have one face that's like a PR face that's promotional and saying all these great things can happen, but secretly they're greedy and horrible.
Yes. Well, they're exploiting the people beneath them. Absolutely.
Right.
And that's why I think the leader of a werewolf-based MLM selling werewolf antidotes or repellent is actually really funny and like clever. That's why I'm into that concept,
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could work if it's like supposed to be comedic.
Daniel, just because you hate werewolves, I swear to God.
I just find your stock werewolf like so boring. Like there's nothing inspiring to me about it. That's why I try to think, what can we do to spin it?
Well, see, that's why I think the MLM angle is really fun and really clever. It's because you're right. Like when you break down certain monsters, they're always about the same thing. Like vampires and zombies are almost always about the same thing. It's the context in which you put them that changes and makes the story interesting, right? Like it's the lens with which you view them that inspires horror or interest or stuff like that.
Yeah, I think you can also transform the expression, right? Like a lot of times in genre, what we have to do is not only spin the trope, but you've got to like present it differently. You don't have to, but that adds extra to it. Like,
I hear you.
I have
Courtney,
an idea
what do you think?
that might work in thinking about like how to make this different and not like blatantly werewolfy and like that sort of transformation process. What if it's less werewolf and more like were-dog, and the dogs in the town are the ones that are actually in control of everything and are like warping the townspeople to do their bidding?
And so you're saying like there's like a chimera dog creature that's in charge, sort of?
Essentially, yeah. But like let's say you have like a family dog, but it is actually a were-dog. And it kind of has this grasp on you. Like each family is assigned one to like keep an eye on them, essentially.
That's like Get Out, kind of, which I think is neat because the companions that they have that are mute, they're really the ones who've been transplanted, which is creepy.
Yeah. And then what we can also do with that is we can give the MLM a little bit more shape and structure, and maybe the owner of this MLM is like a selective dog breeder or something like that. And so like there's a
and
deep
you have dog
obsession.
people.
Right.
Like
exactly.
dog breeder people.
Yeah.
And then
Okay, now I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
So what I'm hearing is we're kind of mixing Best in Show with like
I was
a
just
werewolf.
thinking
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Best in
what
Show,
we're
but
just
with
a little
werewolf
spin because I feel
elements.
like now it is still wolfish because dogs and wolves like they're the same, bucket, but
Yeah.
there's something more frightening about
Same
dogs
bucket.
because they're our best friends,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think the other thing that you could do is if you really wanted to, you could take that obsessive animal culture and you can apply it to other animals as well. Like I know that
birds or like
I was thinking horses specifically.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. Horse
Because
people
I know
are-
that there are towns in Ireland that I've visited that are like obsessed with horses and horse riding and stuff like that, where it's like, we are known for this. This is our thing. Like that could definitely be a thing as well. And also where horses are kind of goofy and inherent.
I mean, you could have the other family own horses because they're so wealthy and they're escaping to this ranch where they have their horses. And so you can have some metaphorical expressions going on with the animals,
Yeah, absolutely. I do kind of like the idea of the dogs being, I think I'm going to, personally, my headcanon is I'm sticking with the dogs because I think that's more fun. But yeah, I like that concept.
Yeah. Cool.
I think that we're at a pretty good place to pivot over to another world building jam session. How about you guys? Do we want to leave this MLM dog cult to itself?
I think it's got factions and creatures.
All right. So let's go ahead and roll a new subgenre, figure out what our next scenario is going to be. All right, y'all. We've got a haunted house. So what we're going to be focusing on within this haunted house is a child. The theme that we're going to be focusing on is treachery. So camera is mostly focused on the child. We've got a haunted house. The theme is treachery. My brain kind of immediately goes to The Shining, but I'm willing to hear what other people have to say. So what are we thinking here?
I mean, I was also thinking The Exorcist. So you could sort of go either way with like the child being like the house of some sort of monster or witnessing all of this horrible stuff happening around them.
I was thinking Orphanage.
That's a great movie. The Orphanage is fantastic. Oh, it's great.
Oh, I didn't know the movie. I was just thinking of Orphanage.
Okay.
An Orphanage could work as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, immediately there, when we think of treachery and an orphanage, I am thinking of, like the feeling of your parents giving you up for whatever reason. Right. And then of course the orphanage itself is haunted. And so there's something pretty terrible to that as well. Or do we want to focus on something else, that belies treachery?
Thinking of a murderous child of some kind.
Or maybe the child's family had a terrible, mysterious accident happen to them, and that's the reason why the child is an orphan now.
Yeah.
And maybe there's something related to the child, whether it's like purposefully doing these things or it just has this aura of like bad luck, or the child itself is haunted, like a ghost.
Can the child be a psychic?
Sure.
Like Carrie style? Haunted by something?
So remember, it's a haunted house. So I think the idea that we're focusing on a child and they're coming into a haunted orphanage, I like that concept. But I'm also totally open to the idea of a psychic child that is coming from a tragic backstory who is also forced to confront a haunted house. Like when you initially said psychic, Daniel, I was thinking of like an empath. So someone who can investigate the hauntings of this place like no one else can. Like
I was thinking that their trauma is being expressed in the house, and that's what makes it haunted.
Gotcha. So they're okay. So that actually works really well as well, I think, because their trauma is now leaching out into this orphanage, and it's causing,
exactly.
like manifestations to happen. I can totally see that. Yeah.
I guess the perspective would be the other orphans there trying to deal with this. And I don't even know if the kid's evil. Maybe the kid doesn't realize he's the one that's causing it, and they have to go into his subconscious to like figure it out.
I like that concept a lot. The idea that the kid doesn't know that his trauma is leaching out into this house, and it's manifesting as these expressions of grief and trauma.
Like he could be mute or something, and so he can't tell anyone, and they've got to figure it out for him.
And then, of course, what you can also do is you can have it so there are all these rumors, and then a new creepy kid shows up at the orphanage. So everyone immediately assumes that he's responsible, one, for his family's death, and two, for all of these mysterious things. And I mean, I'm assuming we can say hauntings and murders that are happening since he's arrived, right?
Yeah.
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 I mean, it might not even be like he might have these powers or something, but there might be like some third party that's actually responsible, and his powers are connected to it in some way. Who knows?
Courtney, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm seeing like some sort of like demon, like manifestation of grief that possessed him, or maybe it was even somebody in his family who had tragically died. Maybe their ghost has been attached to him, and they're just sort of lashing out at everything.
That's really interesting. I like the idea that maybe this child is actually the hero that saved or survived, but had to like murder his murderous sibling in order to survive or something like that. Yeah. And so the shade that's following him is the murderous sibling, and he's got to now, or they've got to now stop that sibling from killing again, you know, that type of thing.
I like that. And that could also bring in like previous family dynamics, like maybe this child is the older one, and when their younger sibling is born, they just like never had a good feeling about that one.
That's even more fun.
Of course, the parents were always like, "Oh no, like you'll totally get along with your little brother or whatever." And then of course tragedy occurred.
Oh yeah, and then we get absolutely.
Yeah, then you have a kid story too, like was it Stand By Me? It's told from perspective of kids.
I was thinking The Devil's Backbone, which is one of Guillermo del Toro's earlier movies, which I would also like this episode to be kind of like, hey, you should watch these movies if you haven't, because man, The Devil's Backbone is such a great film. It's really, really fantastic. Cannot recommend that enough. But yeah, so I feel like we nailed this concept really quickly. I love how different it feels. I feel like it needs a twist. What do you guys think?
Oh, absolutely. Always needs a twist.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and roll a twist and see what we get. Okay, now I know that this is a cliche in and of itself, but there's a reason it's a twist here. It says someone has been dead the whole time. Again, classic horror like cliche. How do we make that interesting? Daniel, I heard your O of disappointment. Let's make it cool. Let's make it fun. So who has been dead the entire time, and how can we make this interesting?
This would work in a short story, but the kid is actually flatlining. The whole experience is the flatlining, because the haunted thing that's haunting him is his sibling strangling him to death, and he only realizes that once he wakes up from it, and there's a question of whether he survives.
So we've got like an occurrence at Owl Creek type situation going on.
Sure.
If we're bringing in classic short story literature here. Yeah. Okay. So let's take that concept, right? Like, I like that idea, Daniel. Courtney, what do you think?
So the first thing that came to mind for it was that it's actually the child is dead, but we don't realize it because the sibling, the murderous sibling, has taken over the body, and in doing so has also kind of kept the body animated.
So we've got like
a dueling like souls going on inside.
Yeah, you've got like a possession story going on as well.
So like the issue there is when you get rid of the murderous one, the good one also has to go permanently.
Interesting.
It's like a golem then.
Kind of, right? Or like an undead automaton situation, right?
Yeah.
I do want to get the hacky version out of the way because, like, again, I have to because it's fun, but it's like, okay, the way that I would see this, right, is that the story would start with both of the siblings coming into this orphanage, right? And because they're the creepy kids whose parents died, the rest of the orphanage looks at them like they're kind of, weird and they're kind of outcast, right? So it's mostly being told from the child's perspective. And his only solace is his sibling. And then at the very end, you find out that sibling has been dead. And that's been the murderous one the entire time.
Yeah.
That
could work. That's cool.
I do think that works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, pick your own poison, I think. I think we've got good options for all three of these here. You know what I mean?
And I bet you could blend these together to make something.
Yeah.
You could also have it with your version, Rob, where maybe the actually alive child is so traumatized because he had to kill his sibling.
Yep.
That his mind has just like kind of fractured, and
there's some disassociation happening.
Yeah, he's seeing this as if it were actually real.
And then we can bring in the possession angle that you were talking about, Courtney, where maybe like that manifests in its own murderous impulse, and he thinks that he's watching his brother or sister murder people and he's helpless, or they're helpless in some way, but it's actually them. Because then we can get into that again, the nice trope of like, he was also the killer the entire time as well.
Sort of like Fight Club-y in a way.
Yeah, exactly. You mix in like Fight Club with what is it, the stepchild, I think it's called, or you can even use the orphan if you wanted to go a little bit more modern. But yeah. And then Daniel, how do we bring in your flatliners type situation?
I think that might just be folded in from a stylistic way in the way you tell it. Like if it was a story, you might tell their relationship through images of that, rather than it being a literal thing.
Okay. I'm going to get a little bit dark here. Hold on. Can we tell it from the perspective of someone who is also perhaps suicidal? And every time they attempt suicide, that's actually like the possession angle kind of kicking in, or like something shifts within them. I don't know how much I like that concept, especially because horror has a bad habit of like stigmatizing mental health issues anyways. But there might be something there where it's like, it's not a mental health issue. It's like you're literally being possessed by your evil sibling. Like there might be something.
Yeah, I think that would be neat. Yeah. It also reifies it, like, which I feel like is always helpful,
Yeah. Again, there's always, I do always want to avoid that trope of like, yo, this shit's fucking hacky because we're in a spooky asylum. And, like that's always the thing that I found that like, yes, it's spooky, but it's also like, yeah, it's because it's so miserable because of how badly we've treated those people. And also because how poorly we've misunderstood those things for so long. But anyway, I feel like that we've kind of come to a good situation with this. Like, I feel like if you wanted to have this as a scenario, we've really solidified everything. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, it's workable. There's still some holes in terms of like what are the groups involved, but I feel like that could be expanded if we wanted to pursue it.
Absolutely.
I also feel like you could kind of bring the story into different time frames depending on what sort of groups you want to have involved. Like you could make it kind of a Dickensian thing, or you could have it be modern day. You could make it like religious in some way, like it's a church-based orphanage. There's a lot of different routes you could
That's
take.
a great point. Yeah. You can bring in your own spooky subgenre or subgenre, I guess. But yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And then, I mean, if we wanted to go with the religious angle, there's always the idea that like maybe this victim has been kind of like groomed in such a way so they would be murderous, and like maybe there's like a weird demon cult behind it in some way. Like that's always kind of interesting to work with as
those are always fun, demon cults.
Yeah. So I think we're good here, and I think we have time that we can do one more jam. I think that I'm in the spooky mood, and everything good comes in threes, myself included. So I think I'm ready to roll one more time for these for this jam session and figure out what we can do. So last time this episode for the subgenre of spooky, let's see what we got. Ooh, so we've got roll 2 and combine. So let's see what happens. First up, we've got witches. And then second all, we got vampires. So we've got vampires and witches, already a good combination. Let's see what thing we're focusing on. We're focusing on a skeptic, which I think is immediately fun because we've got vampires and witches involved. So the theme is going to be the mundane.
Oh.
So considering that we're focusing on a skeptic, I think that the mundane can actually work here. What do you guys think?
Of course, been watching like What We Do in the Shadows lately, so that's on my mind, but thinking that this could be like a comedy horror type thing where you have this very like skeptical investigator who's looking into supposed like sightings of witches or vampires, and they like keep kind of stumbling over like blatant proof that this stuff exists, but they just keep completely missing it.
Or there's like a logical explanation for everything.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. What do you think, Daniel? I feel like we went a little bit comedic on the first one.
Yeah, we did.
So I'm like, I like the idea. I like the concept, but I'm also like, okay, do we want to go with this? And also like, if we're talking about modern vampire stuff, spoilers for Midnight Mass.
Spoilers.
Literally spoilers in, I can't say anything more than that.
Okay.
But if you haven't seen, I mean, I got vampires in literally episode 1. So, you know,
yeah, that's fair.
But I still recommend Midnight Mass. It's not Flanagan's best work, but it is still worth watching. Holy shit. You should definitely fast forward through some of the long ass monologues, but it's still enjoyable anyway, especially for recovering Catholics like my wife. But anyway, so we've got witches, we've got vampires, we've got a skeptic in the middle. Daniel, what do you say about this? Courtney's got the comedic angle. What do you think, Daniel? Can we make this genuinely spooky?
If you weren't going for comedy, what I was going to say, if we were going for comedy, I would put the actual witches and vampires in the skeptic's team. So you have an added level of them just foiling the skeptic on top of that. But if we weren't doing that, I would say it would be interesting if the witches and vampires are all really charlatans. And so it's various levels of schemes that are being uncovered. But they're equally horrible. Like, it's not a vampire, but it's someone who like has this fetishistic interest in bloodletting, or it's not a witch. Okay. It's someone who just like loves bestiality or something horrible, you know. And so like you have the skeptic investigating this. Well, witches often in literature sleep with animals. I mean, that's just what they do. So you could have like this investigator, kind of like in a what's the detective show called? True Detective style, exploring these vistas of the mundane that are actually quite horrible.
I see. I'm sorry for any witches who are listening to this right now. And Daniel's weirdly slanderous. Like,
it's all like it is.
I think you know that when they lay with the goat, that's Satan, not an actual goat, right?
Yeah, but there's other literature of them actually sleeping with animals. So, like
what? What do you? I've not heard of this trope before.
Just do some Googling, you'll find it.
Well, can you name some literature? Like, I'm not familiar with this trope at all.
And what I'm talking about, like folklore, is kind of where that happens. Greek mythology, what you would call witches, sleeping with animals.
Oh, see, okay. Maybe I feel like that's a bit of a stretch, and I wouldn't necessarily categorize them as witches.
I will Google some for you right now.
Okay, Daniel. Okay.
Just imagining Daniel's search history after this episode.
I know, right? Like, witches bestiality ? Like,
History of zoophilia.
Okay.
There's plenty of
you got
mentions
some
of witches and sex with animals.
Okay. You know what? This is not a productive conversation. I think that we can probably pivot back to our spooky vampire witch story that has a skeptic involved. And we can leave Mr. Hands out of this time, okay? Don't Google that if you don't know what that is. Oh my God.
Jesus,
do not
do that.
Yeah, that's a internet landmine. Do not look at that. Anyway,
what were we talking about?
I don't know. This last one has really gotten away from us, I think. Okay.
What I was saying is that there are cases that sometimes witches have sex with animals because it's part of blood rituals.
I see. You would know better than we do, Daniel. I have not heard of that. Okay, I can support this concept of so you've got like a Scully type as the skeptic, right?
Yes.
And do we want to actually, can we just make this the X-Files and make Daniel really happy? Like, can't we just do that?
I think we should do that. Yeah.
Okay. So are the skeptics partners a vampire and witch? Because I think I would really like that as well.
I do like that idea. Yeah.
It's not like Mulder who's like,
they're actually
like
they're just actually a vampire and a witch. Yes, straight up.
Oh, maybe they're from the Society of Such Creatures, and they're trying to make sure that it hasn't infiltrated the human world. So they're investigating claims of it, but it's all mundane claims in the end. That shows how horrible humans actually are.
Yeah, I like that.
And then like I can see it as like this is the skeptic who's like, look, I know you guys say that you're a vampire, and I know you say that you're a witch, but like, let's be real, those things don't exist. And yet, like, he's still a hunter of the paranormal, like that's the type of thing. I like that a lot, actually. I think we can work with that concept for sure. Do we want to throw in a twist and see how that works out?
Always.
Okay. So let's go ahead and roll the dice, see what happens. Well, fuck. I don't know how this one is going to work. It says here that everyone is already dead. So, yeah, I don't know how that one's going to work. Is the skeptic himself a zombie? And that would mean that everyone is already undead? Does that work? Or is this like a Yu Yu Hakusho type situation where this guy is dead? The skeptic is dead, but he's been given a second chance at life by like, actually, that might work pretty well. We might just have that as a way. We can just steal Yu Yu Hakusho's plot. So this person died, and their only way back into the living world is they've got to be a police for the supernatural stuff. And this person is just like, look, I believe that I'm having hallucinations. I believe that this stuff doesn't exist. And like the witch and the vampire are like the people who are actually representatives of their respective realms who are trying to help this human, like do stuff. I don't know. That's kind of the concept that I'm running with right now. Daniel and Courtney, what do you have?
No, it sounds fun. I could see it as, the person died and this like demon or some sort of entity in the afterlife kind of made a deal with them. Like, you can either actually be dead and this is the end and you're never gonna be able to like see the earth again, or I can give you a second chance if you help me kind of look into all these things that are happening.
I mean, the easiest one is that take it literally. Like, the skeptics are actually vampires and witches, and they're already dead, and they're investigating the living world.
Okay. That might be interesting too, actually. If you want to flip the perspective entirely, where the skeptics are the witches and vampires themselves, And so they're investigating the mundane and discovering something. Like what is the purpose of the investigation? What is the purpose of the vampire and the witch coming together with some skepticism? Like they're like, okay, we don't believe that the humans have a right to exist anymore. Should we invade and kill them all? And then it's an investigation into the mundane and what makes their lives special. Because I can see that working out as well, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that they must, if these are, ageless creatures that exist outside of the mundane world, they must be looking for something in humanity that tells them some fundamental truth about humans. And I don't know if it seems like they're plumbing the depths of like horror among human acts.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what they're looking for, but they must be looking for something.
That's actually kind of
true.
interesting to think about. Like maybe they're investigating human atrocities to figure out like where humanity has gone wrong in some way.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you have these supernatural creatures and what they're investigating is, so it's the X-Files, but from the aliens' perspective, basically, right? Like where
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I can work with that. I think that's really cool, actually. I think that's really
Agreed.
fun to work with. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the story that we've got going on is there is a pair of like FBI agents. One is a vampire, one is a witch, and their job is to hunt down regular people who are also serial killers. Is that kind of what we're working with?
No, that would be neat too. Like they're actually doing a service because they're hunting down serial killers too at some extent.
Yeah. And then, I mean, like, this is the type of situation where if this was on Fox, by season 6, we would or CW, we would understand that like these serial killers are actually possessed by demons and it's actually not nearly as interesting as it once was by like season 1 or 2. But, like I like the idea that these are just regular supernatural folk investigating mundane human crimes. I think that's really fun.
The real horror is that people can be this horrible. That's the whole point of it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
The supernatural world is outside of this and they're above this, but that's what is being revealed in the show.
Absolutely. And what we should find horrifying, which is the vampire, which is the witch, right? Like traditionally we should look at those things and be horrified by them. But when we have them as our protagonists, when they're displaying all these heroic kind of attributes and what they're fighting is purely human, I think that's a really cool and interesting statement to make as well.
And maybe it's not even fully like a benevolent or selfless kind of thing. Maybe there's also an element of like we're the monsters and you're like encroaching on our territory by doing all of this evil shit.
You could just pull a Dexter and have it be like, look, we're hunting the bad guys because we need parts and victims. So, like in order to stay hidden, we're just hunting the really bad ones. That could be a thing as well.
I mean, that might be the thing you're asking about. Like, what are they searching for? To Courtney's point, it could be that these acts are so atrocious, they border on the realm beyond the mundane. And they've got to investigate these things because it can open a fissure, metaphorically speaking, between this world and the next.
When a human is so horrifying that their acts can actually cause paranormal things to happen around them.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool thing that we can focus on too. That's actually really interesting because some incidental world building is, like the realm or the space between the normal and the supernatural can be opened up through human acts. Like that's kind of a cool concept that you can work with as well.
Agreed.
Yeah. I think that's it, guys. I think we've kind of come up with 3 really cool scenarios. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I really love the kind of the plot lines that we came up with here. I think they're also very different from one another. There's not a ton of overlap. Yeah.
I can also see like if you're looking for a spooky one shot to run this Halloween, like I know it's a bit short notice, but I think that any one of these scenarios could work pretty well if you're looking to do something like that.
just happy we got the X-Files in there.
Yeah, of course. Well, no, I mean, that's like a layup. Anytime that you want to please Daniel, you just like, hey, Daniel, X-Files, and like snap and point in his like finger guns in his direction. He's like, yes.
It actually makes me think of True Detective, which I really like.
Oh man, season 1 of True Detective so good.
So good. Season 3 is pretty solid too.
Is it? I've heard. I think you've talked about that a little bit. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I didn't see season 2 though. So
yeah, season 2 is bad.
Yeah,
I got like 3 episodes in, and then I'm like, I'm going to Wikipedia the rest of this. I don't really need to watch this. You know.
Ouch. Yeah.
Yeah, it was not good. All right, I think that'll do it for this episode of Worldbuild with us, you guys. I hope you guys have a great spooky week. Remember that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com. Click on the link that says submit prompt, and we will build your world. Promise. Remember that if you want to follow us on social media, you can always go to Twitter and find us at Let's Worldbuild. And where we tweet occasionally. If you want to come talk to us on our Discord, or if you're feeling particularly generous and you want to give us money over on Patreon, you can find links for both of those in the description of this very podcast episode. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this spooky, spooky week together. Until next time.